How do I test that? So I've talked to some of our marine policy people in the RSPB about that, but the differences, what are the differences and what are the similarities? I think it was a really great introduction. What I'm going to present now is essentially a piece of partnership working with the National Trust, the Wildlife Trusts, the Woodland Trust, the RSPB, who currently pay my salary, and Countryscape, who helped to really make the facilitation of this happen. So, just by way of an introduction,
One on the left, one on your right. That's
thank you. Landscape scale conservation is coming of age. There have been plenty of experiments recently. The RSPB's Featurescape programme, the living landscapes of the wildlife trusts, the nature improvement areas in Natural England builds on a lot of work that's been going on already with the AOMBs and the national parks. We know a lot about how to do things in the terrestrial environment now. Kind of a mantra coming from Sir John Lawton's work when he looked at a review of the ecosystem ecological network in England. We want bigger sites, we want better quality sites, we want more of them, and we want them to be joined. I like to add to that joined, not just ecologically, but culturally and socially, and also sectors, and you know, the theme of this conference, connecting between the land and the sea. So, bit of a screenshot. I really quite like JNCC's interactive mapping tool, and that was the first place I looked and I thought, well, what the hell is protected around the UK? I've already admitted to not being much of a marine person. However, I've just taken on a new role in the RSPB as the UK Featurescapes Programme Manager, and I'm very keen to make sure I think about the landscape in the sea. So these two maps will be joined in future between stuff on the land and stuff in the sea. So, what did we do to start trying to think about creating a recipe for success? Well, this was work that was funded by the EU Life Project Fund, and it was a project, the Featurescapes programme, for 3 years. So we had to do an end-of-life conference, but what I wanted to do is do it a bit differently. So I wanted it to be highly interactive. I wanted it to be about the future of landscape scale conservation in Europe, and we wanted to output a recipe for success in landscape scale conservation. So about 150 people from around the UK and some people from Europe gathered in Bristol for a day. And that's kind of like super brain. 150 people, that's about 3,000 years worth of experience in the room. How do you harness that? Because landscape scale conservation has come of age. There's lots of experiments happened, practical and from a research perspective. What's a recipe for success look like? So, 16 tables, 16 questions based around 5 themes: engaging, planning, doing, evaluating, and sustaining. So we set the framework, we designed this very carefully in advance. And what I want to do is just run through fairly quickly these 5 stages in the broad sense of what came out of that. But what I'm going to do is give it a bit of a marine twist wherever possible, because I've talked to our marine people. One in marine policy and one who's a practical marine person who's working in Morecambe Bay and sits in the same office as the terrestrial people. So I am wondering sometimes how disconnected we are when the lead for the Featurescape is sitting right next to the guy who does the marine work. So I thought that was kind of a neat connection. So, theme, engaging. Facilitation, facilitation, facilitation. Remember, this is what came out of the super brain. It's not my opinion. It's not Jonathan's opinion. It's not the team's opinion that put this together. Shared vision. Bring in multiple stakeholders, including the ones that don't get on with each other. Methods, get the methods right for the right audience. What do you want people to do, and what methods are going to best achieve that? Key individuals are fundamental. In the marine environment, one of the things that came out from this was engagement in the marine environment is actually quite challenging. So it's been really interesting to see some of the cultural dimensions of this mentioned, because I think there's some very important solutions there. But engagement can be more challenging in the marine environment, so this was something that came out. I was talking to marine people. Planning. Think about the natural, cultural, the social factors, a flexible boundary. Think about the data beyond the core. Think about traditional and innovative ways of funding, and harness the multiple skills. It's like each partnership is a super brain. There's a super brain in this room right now starting to think about the challenges of interaction between the marine and terrestrial environments. So here, planning was interesting when I talked to the marine people. There was definitely something around ownership being different in the seas. And that's fundamentally quite challenging, and it should be picked up if we wanted to include marine in the recipe for success. Doing. Thinking about multiple scales has always been an interesting conversation about scale, and you do have to think about the multiple scales. What are the focal species? Be very careful about which species you're choosing, both from an ecological perspective, but also from an engagement type perspective. So know why you're choosing your species. Creative public participation. I think there's some very interesting examples of creative public participation in the marine type environment. Capturing the Coast, Newcastle University's programme to be the largest citizen science project in the marine environment. I think that's quite interesting to start following. It couldn't be funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund. Making climate smart has already been some talk about climate change, so including that in the recipe. So evaluating, another theme in the recipe. Evidence base and baseline. Well, we just heard, Chris, you just picked that up massively. I mean, it's really challenging. In the marine environment, a lot less data, a lot less resource to actually collect the data as well. Existing data and your knowledge, well, there's potentially a solution to some of that. Using the existing data, but then using local knowledge and valuing qualitative information and understanding how to really harness the power of qualitative information. And including the social and the ecological dimensions as well, integration again being joined up. Sustaining, the last of the themes. I think this, all stages, this is highly relevant to all stages, right from the beginning. There's not really quite a linear process here between these 5 themes. It helps to frame things. Share knowledge and credit success, trust, tenacity. I think that's a really good one. And transparency, fundamental to democracy, fundamental to facilitation, and communicate success. It's sharing and communicating access and continuing to communicate that something's been successful to help sustain things. And the super brain. Don't forget the super brain. I've even started using that internally now. I'm doing a super brain this time. That means we're not going to be sitting around a table and it'll be designed and you're going to work really hard in that meeting. So, just to summarise, this is applicable in seascapes. Well, almost all of these seem to apply, but there does seem to be some exceptions if we want to include these in a recipe for success. Seems to be 3D environment, challenge, ownership, just mentioned, lack of data, a lack of resource to get things done, collect data. Engagement is more challenging. The boundaries are greyer and blurred, and species mobility. Now, we talked about a bunch of things, but Chris, you had me writing down a few more to add to this list. So challenge this, please, and add more. But I think there's a prevent habitat loss, because maybe we've lost less. I think that is a contentious one, but I thought the notion of let's prevent stuff, let that be a good thing to do anyway. The whole notion of the air, I've been thinking through the same thing. The atmosphere and the oceans are both fluids. So there is a column there, but we do think of that more in the marine environment than the terrestrial, perhaps. And the whole physical dimension stuff, the water column stuff that you talked about. So I'm keen to add more to this list. It's a work in progress as we kind of kick the tires on the recipe. So what next? We're going to publish the recipe. It's out for consultation to John Lawton, a few others, to Mr. Pereira, our president of the UK chapter of iale, is reviewing that as well. So we're getting people from different organisations and partners to take a look. Test the recipe. I've already applied it to the strategy for the new landscape conservation programme that we developed in the RSPB. Conversation. This is an ongoing conversation, it's a work in progress. there is a hashtag landscape scale. A few of us are keeping a conversation going about sharing best practice and just communicating. Please use that. I'd love to see more people on that. It's a bit of a personal Twitter experiment, where I am now thoroughly addicted to Twitter. So and there's a website as well, www.landscapescale.com. You can see both Teresa and Sir John Lawton's presentations, and we'll publish this stuff up there at some point. So, just broad conclusions, broadly applicable recipe. Okay, so maybe we should have one recipe for both. Yep. That's the landscape and seascape interaction. And super brain, it was actually quite a nice idea. It worked. It looked very different. There was lots of pink brains everywhere, and we started off with a very different feel for the day, and it worked really well. So that's it really. And some acknowledgements. Brilliant team, the super brain, and it was a great partnership. So.
Thanks, Adrian. Any questions from that to the back?
Going on, in your evaluation, you talked about